Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishor from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 32 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishor, a show in which we analyze the happenings from around the world and their impact on India. Before we begin with today's episode, we just hope that you and your loved ones are safe at home and are healthy during these troubled times. Remember to stay home and stay safe. In the past week or so, there has been news that India has been successful in disengaging with China in the upper reaches of Ladakh, close to the Pangong Tso region. A 9 month long imbroglio has now been peacefully resolved. Almost unexpectedly, the Indian and the Pakistani Director Generals of Military Operations issued a joint statement saying that they will adhere to a ceasefire along the line of control to ensure that peace prevails along the frontier. So, in effect, in less than a month, India, which was staring at an almost two front war, to now de escalation on both the fronts. That's the situation right now. So, what exact de escalation are we talking about? And what led to this current situation? So, let's discuss both these in today's episode. So, Mohal, let's begin with the line of actual control. The Chinese making their moves along the Pangong Tso and the eventual 9 rounds of talks and the eventual disengagement and de-escalation. So, you want to quickly summarize and explain what happened there?
Yeah, so Kishore, on February 11th, just like around little more than 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh made a statement in Parliament where he stated that they had agreed upon a sort of disengagement in the Pangong Tso region on both the north and the south banks,
Mm-hmm.
and the disengagement was in progress. And I believe like later that day, we'd have the first visuals where I believe there were tanks which were withdrawing from the slopes of Rechinla where they were like perilously close to each other.
Right, right.
So
There were these multiple rounds of discussions happening for almost 9 months now, and it was a situation where nobody wanted to blink first, and nobody
mhm.
wanted to look the weaker among the two, and eventually, while each round was concluded almost in an inconclusive manner, there was nothing to show that the Chinese would blink first or the Indians would blink first. But now that the disengagement is almost complete, at least in the Pangong Tso region, and both the sides are claiming that Finger 4 to Finger 8 region would not be patrollable at least for the near future. They are not the official words, but that's the kind of the gist that we get to hear. You want to elaborate on that part because that was the main argument or the main moot point for both the sides all along. So you want to elaborate on that part?
Yeah, so I mean the one of the most visible friction points was the Pangong Tso Lake, where we did
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of images, satellite images, especially from many Twitter users like Detresfa and others. And this was the most contentious region. I know Galwan was in the news because of the terrible loss of lives on the
Mm-hmm.
Indian side and also on the Chinese side.
Which,
But I
by the
think
way,
this was,
which, by the way, they kind of acknowledged that they lost four
yeah,
soldiers. Yeah,
I guess we'll come to that little bit later.
yeah.
But I mean, coming back to the point, uh, what was important is that this was the biggest friction point in my mind. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the status quo had irrevocably changed. I mean, Galwan, there was also a change in the status quo where they had ingressed into the on the Indian side of the our perceived LAC.
mm,
But what was different about Pangong so was that it was the most visible region, and this was like kind of crucial region that this call also escalate into something bigger. I mean, there have been transgressions in the hot springs area, but it's more flat terrain, and it didn't garner the same amount of news. So the good news is that as per the new images that they have all the semi-permanent, or even maybe you can call it permanent structures or fortifications that they had built between finger 4 to 8, they had demolished, which is kind of, I think, a significant achievement for the Indian position,
mm,
because they had mentioned that the finger 4 to 8 should be pulled back. I think if reports are to be believed, there were some reports that saying that uh, the Chinese wanted the Indians to go as far back as finger two, and then Indian held their ground that no, we won't go back, and they wanted to maybe just go back to finger five or six, which Indians, to their credit, held their ground and saying nothing doing. We had to go back to the old status quo. Now,
mm,
as you very well mentioned, that the patrolling is not going to happen for some time, but that brings up a new question that when the next time when the patrols meet each other, and what's the new modus vivendi to resolve it peacefully so
mm.
that it doesn't escalate to another standoff event. So good news for now, but more yet to come. And with the Chinese, you never know, just like the Pakistanis, that you cannot trust them either. One good thing, however, this time I would say is, I mean, on the Chinese side, they had, I believe, like a military commissar. I don't know like what's the exact uh, position. And on Indian side, we had the I don't know if it's a diplomat, but it's a representative from the Ministry of External Affairs, right, Kishore? So they went through that to make sure that a written agreement, so it's not only the military negotiators but also somebody from New Delhi was present
Mm,
in the meetings when the border when this nine round of meetings which were held. So also a Ministry of External Affairs personnel, or maybe Ministry of Home Affairs, I could be wrong, but there was a representative from New Delhi who could help guide the process. And the
right.
good thing is that a written agreement was come, which I don't think has come up in the past. It has been more of a verbal agreements that they honor. So getting pen to paper, I mean, for such a disengagement is also quite credible in my opinion.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Right. So the focus now shifts to other parts of the LAC like Sikkim or even Arunachal, where again we keep hearing about these incursions and skirmishes that happen on and off. Not skirmishes exactly, but at least incursions that happen regularly. But no matter what happens, Indian troops, as almost everybody knows by now,
Hmm.
would continue to be on the vigil even
Yeah,
now that spring is upon us out there in on the
yeah. I
mountain
mean,
passes.
even I believe like less than a month ago there was a skirmish in Nakula in Sikkim, I believe.
Right,
So
right.
The Chinese will keep probing us. I mean,
Mm,
this was a disengagement. However, the tanks, I think, have pulled back, let's say, a few kilometers. Let's say maybe there were reports like to Shandong in the on the Chinese side, which are like probably 20 kilometers, and to the Indian side, I mean, I'm not sure how far we have pulled back. But see, the other disadvantage India is that we are because of our infrastructure, I know we are building it up and ramping it up a lot. We don't have the same level of access to the Chinese. So the Chinese could very well come back and they could beat us to the position. So now there has been some commentary that why did we vacate the heights in the south of
Pala-
Pangong, sorry, near the
yep,
Spanger Gap. And I think we covered that in one of our episodes,
yep, yep.
that achieving control of those heights was crucial to our negotiating position. Like in late August, when we climbed those peaks
Right.
in the middle of the night, that was a good. But I guess you had to give up. I mean, this was probably one of the better deals that India could come up with, where we sort of bartered the position on the south bank of Pangong, so for the north bank of Pangong. So the infrastructure is kind of is definitely a limiting factor. So the the end game here is that we need the complete induction of forces from Ladakh sector, which hasn't happened. Is just pulled back. So we'll have to wait and watch. It's a slow process, but
Mm.
I mean the Chinese could very well be probing for the next weak spot. I don't think this overall it's not like a massive new turn in India China relationships. I mean, as we mentioned on the podcast last year, I still think, I mean, in my personal opinion, that this friction will continue and it could just
Yep,
get more worse and ugly. I mean,
yep,
the next
yep.
5 years, I still think there could be a military confrontation between India and China. And I still hold to that thought, even though there is temporary peace in the air. And on the mention of spring, yeah, I mean, spring is around there. So in 6 weeks, when the conditions are more conducive, I hope India is like better prepared for any such Chinese incursion. So like last time what was reported was supposedly happened, that the Chinese were doing tactical exercises in Tibet, and in a matter of few hours they just diverted their troops to the these standoff points. So we have to be vigilant. I know, like, uh, Lieutenant General YK Joshi has mentioned that the LOCization of LAC won't happen. So I hope like the Chief of Army Staff and General Navarane and like everybody has thought of, like, that how not to be how to be prepared for the next eventuality, where if the Chinese just come in matter of few years because they have vastly greater infrastructure,
Mm.
how do we checkmate them and make sure that we don't end up down this road in the future?
Yep, yep. But then the good part of the actual lack of assurance that the Indians gave. I mean, they haven't given up on anything, and
Yeah.
even the infrastructure push that the Indians were more or less uh, committed to in the past year and a half, or even two
Mm-hmm.
years, which actually kind of led to all this. If you look at it
Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
hindsight, that will continue as such, because there have been no assurances from the Indians that they will stop or they will go slow on any of that. So I think that's a good positive note for Indians. And as you said, this is actually just a tactical pause in the overall scheme of things. The core issue between India and China with regards to the LAC being demarcated, delineated, that continues to remain a thorn, and that does not seem to be getting clarified in any which way, at least in the near future. So the thorns remain, but then at least this is a temporary pause in hostilities.
Yeah, I think there were some reports saying that the Chinese had suffered up to, I mean, I wouldn't say like casualties, but they had like at least maybe 100 soldiers evacuated in the because of the brutal winter up on like the,
Mhm.
I mean, some of these heights in the North Pangong, so like they were like up to like 55 or 5,800 meters. So they are not like very hospitable in the sub-zero freezing temperatures. So
Right.
due to like pulmonary edema, or there could be like frostbite. I mean, many of the soldiers had to be evacuated, and China did a lot of propaganda with, oh, we are dropping by drones hot meals, or we have this prefabricated houses with heating and stuff. But I think the reality is much different than what the Chinese state propaganda says. So I think they wanted to, I mean, as if the reports are to be believed again, that they wanted to withdraw from some time, but they didn't want to cede any ground. But eventually they came to the conclusion that it's just better to beat retreat for now, and I'm sure they will be back to their old ways in matter of no time. So
Yep.
okay, so moving on to the other big news, which I think just happened this week. There was a surprising news that came out that the old ceasefire agreement, I think, which was like first done, Kishor, in what, 2003, with India and
Right.
China, they
India and
again,
Pakistan.
sorry, India and Pakistan, sorry, India and Pakistan, which was agreed upon like probably like 17 to 18 years ago.
Hmm.
They are, both sides have pledged to honor that agreement. I mean, we had a huge spurt in ceasefire violations, so this is like welcome news. All only also the other contested border, Kishore.
Yep, yep, yeah. As you correctly pointed, it was done by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the Pakistani President General Pervez Musharraf back then. But then, although it held ground for a long time, by 2016 things took a nosedive, and Indians kept pounding the Pakistani positions along the line of control, especially in the Neelam Valley and the surrounding sectors. And while all this was happening, and a lot of pressure was exerted on the Pakistani forces. Again, the news of more and more tunnels being dug up, more and more tunnels being unearthed in the Samba sector and the Jammu sector along the actual international border. So this continued. So there wasn't much of gains, even for the Indians, so to speak, by the relentless pounding. So I think it was kind of back to square one kind of a scenario where you did not have any tactical wins, so to speak, nor did the Pakistanis mend their ways. So I think this was just mindless pounding going on for 2.5 years, and I think somewhere somebody had to stop. And luckily, this time around, it was a joint statement issued, wherein both of them have issued a single statement, uh, hopefully claiming that they want to ensure that they have peace along the line of control. Now, they have not spoken about the international border per se, the region from Jammu, the beginning of the Jammu and Kashmir border, all the way up to where the LOC begins. But be that as it may, at least with regards to the LOC, at least there is some kind of a temporary truce. Again, I just want to use the word temporary truce and not a peace in the annual, because we know how Pakistan always reneges on their promises. So yeah, at least it's a temporary truce, a tactical reprieve for both the countries, not only for India but also for the Pakistani armed forces. So I think it's a good step for now. But again, it's too early to read too much into it, and even if it's too late, we should never read too much into all the Pakistani promises, which we know very well about. In fact, even during Operation Parakram, or even after that, during the post Mumbai attack, LOC has always been hot. There have been no instances where uh, things between India and Pakistan are quite dicey and the LOC is not hot. So LOC is always the first thing that kind of flares up. So the people along the frontier keeps bearing the brunt of any kind of hostilities. But at least it's a good beginning.
The current phase, do you think? I think it became started with like Pulwama Balakot, right? Around like 2 years ago, right? Approximately
Yeah,
to the day.
it kind of started immediately after the Uri attacks, but that was hardly about 3 4 years ago. But then the current phase, as you rightly pointed out, was immediately after the Pulwama attack, and then the retaliation, and then the retaliation to the retaliation, and so on and so forth. But yeah, you make a good point there. And yeah, it was 2 years to the point. Of the Balakot airstrike and the retaliation to that, again, which we had covered in one of our previous episodes as well. Yeah, but then the other point that I wanted to bring in was how the Indian media picked up
Hmm. So
news.
before you that, I just wanted to make one quick point. So
Mm-hmm,
I think that we have bounded them with artillery barrages like quite a bit, but I
mm-hmm,
think it shows the limit of what you can achieve with this. Now, obviously, the government has been not too keen on a hot pursuit or any kind of crossing of the LOC. I mean, obviously, not using planes or missiles post the Balakot attack. So there's only so much. Damage you could inflict on the enemy
mm.
with an artillery barrage. So this shows like I mean, I'm not saying like India did the wrong strategy, but there's only so much you can do by pursuing such a strategy. Only so much pain you can inflict on the enemy. So this did bring, I mean, a loss of soldiers, many of which were not acknowledged by the Pakistani
Hmm,
army.
hmm,
So it
hmm.
did bring pain, but it just shows a limitation of the strategy that artillery can only get you so
Oh,
much. Sorry, go
absolutely.
ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the point is that India continues to keep the LOC sacrosanct. They don't want to violate the LOC, and only in
Even
extreme.
after events of surgical strike and Balakot, which is important to
Exactly,
think.
exactly. So even under extreme circumstances like these surgical strikes, they just have pinpoint or pointed attacks, and then they return and they
Mhm.
say we have completed our operations. In fact, the first party who gets to know are the Pakistanis themselves, where the Indians tell we are done with our operations. So India, on its part, wants to keep the LOC sacrosanct. That's point number one. Point number two is again, even while keeping the LOC sacrosanct, they don't want to cross the threshold, as you rightly pointed out, of going
Climb the
beyond
ladder of escalation that you don't want
going beyond
accidentally.
going
Hmm.
beyond infantry and things like that.
Hmm.
Now, the other point, other problem is during the Balakot airstrikes,
Hmm.
the Indian, I think it was the Northern Army commander. I don't remember who, but they came up with a very interesting choice of
Oh
words
yeah,
where
I
they,
know.
yeah, they did not. I mean, they came up with a new term. I can't recollect now. It was not counterforce, not counter value, but uh,
Like
kind of implying that they wanted to take out only the terror launch
a
pads or the terror.
non-military or something. Yeah,
Huh,
yeah,
yes. So if you say that, then you end up binding yourselves, telling this is
yeah,
our
yeah.
threshold and so on and so forth. So unless and until you have concrete evidence, or unless and until you are attacked by a terror group, you cannot repeat the same thing. And anyway, you have told that you are not going to attack their military structures, you're not going to attack their civilian population. So that way, again, India clearly does not want this to go along the escalation route.
Yeah, I mean, we have come a long way since doing nothing during the 2008 Mumbai attacks. I mean, there is a new paradigm with the cross border, so the government is willing to take risk. But yeah, obviously, it's not unlimited risk. They are like Israel would do for say like obviously we don't have a non Israel doesn't have a nuclear adversary like we do with Pakistan. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a slow progress. I don't think we can expect a drastic shift no matter who is in charge. So, Kishore, one more point I wanted to cover. I think this is the question has come up. Why now? What would be the reasons for? Let's start with Pakistan first, and then come to India.
Mm.
Let's start with Pakistan. Like, why would they agree to such a truce after? I mean, they were not happy with Balakot. Obviously, they were not happy with revocation. I mean, abrogation of Article 370.
Mhm.
So the question I mean, pretty much on the listeners' mind will be why now.
Which is actually quite the $1 million question right now, because not
So,
nobody knows
so,
the answer for
so
that.
So if you tell them, all our listeners will feel like they're millionaires, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, at least let's have a dab at it. Let's try to understand the context in which
Hmm.
Pakistan is right now. Pakistan continues to be haunted by the FAT of grey list. I'm not saying that actually caused all this, but at least let's list down the points, or list down the factors that caused all this. So the FAT of grey list is not going anywhere, at least until another 3 months. And in fact, Shah Mahmood Qureshi went on record to tell that he would want the FAT of observers to come to Pakistan and see for themselves the improvements that have happened in terms of reduction in terror financing and things like that. So Pakistan wants to turn a new leaf and turn a new page and try to convince the world that they are not a state sponsor of terror anymore. But that's the kind of narrative change that Shah Mahmood Qureshi wants. But at the same time, everybody knows that the mindless destruction of the bunkers was not giving any strategic victory at all. But also, the other thing was with regards to the new Biden administration, where we know that there is
Yeah.
no clarity as such with regards to what the Biden administration would do in terms of engaging or disengaging with the Taliban in Afghanistan. And obviously, they would want some kind of support from the Pakistani some kind of assurances. And obviously, Pakistanis would want some kind of assurance back that they would want a cooler line of control while they actually get to work along the Durand line. So I think that may also have been a, a considerable factor. Although we don't clearly know Biden administration's policy towards AFPAC region, that is something that has still not been explicitly carved out. Now, the other thing that people falsely attribute is that China and Pakistan may have had a joint strategy in all this, and China backed off, so Pakistan also backed off, which is actually
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
not the right conclusion to come to. And even General Naravane, who is currently heading the Indian Army, also pointed out the same thing, that although there were suspicions that these two were acting in cohorts, but somehow there was not enough evidence to show that these were actually happening together. So I think that can be easily ruled out, and somehow there were enough people in India who went along the wrong path, coming to wrong conclusions, but that somehow is not the right thing. Now, having said that, I think we also know that surprisingly earlier this month, on 3rd of February, Pakistani Army Chief General Bajwa, he came up with a surprise statement telling that it was time to extend a hand of peace towards India and to ensure that we have peace in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, to ensure that the people of Jammu and Kashmir live in peace. Now, he did not imply that we want to have the current situation continue, wherein India would continue to look after the Indian part of Jammu and Kashmir under Indian control, and Pakistan keeps theirs. But what he actually meant was that let's give peace a chance, at least for now. This, in addition to the other thing where uh, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan had to travel to Sri Lanka on a state visit, and India somehow surprisingly allowed their aircraft to use Indian airspace. So I think somehow 2 plus 2 became 5 in a rather surprising manner, and we ended up with a DGMO joint statement within the next 48 to 72 hours. And even while in Colombo, while addressing the Sri Lankan media, uh, Imran Khan was again pointing out to the same thing, that they want peace in the region, in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, and he continues to extend the hand of peace to Narendra Modi. Although we continue to hear such statements, and we know that they are not even worth uh, uh, the paper that they are written on, but at least these were the sudden quirk of fate that you might want to call, the sudden change of events that happened in the last not even 30 days, which kind of led to the situation that we are in. Now, having said that, will India back off? Will India allow the FATF to take Pakistan out of grey list? I don't think India will be foolish to do any such thing. I don't think India will also want to engage with Pakistan diplomatically. Also, I don't think they would want to do that. The current administration is very clear, and they understand the psyche of the Pakistani Fauj, Pakistani armed forces. So I don't think that would be a mistake that this administration would do. Now, with that, from a local angle, from a domestic angle within Pakistan, I think the Pakistani army and the Imran Khan government will have a lot to answer when asked by the joint opposition. You know that the opposition has all now rallied together. They are now a joint
Yeah.
alliance called the Development, uh, People's Democratic Movement (PDM), which is now an all-party alliance conducting rallies all around the country, and they have been asking tough questions of Imran Khan of late, and now the questions will only increase as to why did you back off against India, and what is your current position. about the abrogation of Article 370. So Imran Khan will have to answer all these tough questions, at least domestically within Pakistan. Mohal?
Yeah, I think also one point is like I think you did elaborate that the economy is also on the brink of pressure with like from FATF and India. Plus, I think I know in India we do mention the two and a half front problem that we face. I think Pakistan also has its own challenges. Obviously, it's not to the same extent as ours. They have the India problem. They also have an unsettled border with
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan,
Hmm.
the Duran line, which they have never accepted. I mean, which Afghanistan has never accepted. And then they have the internal simmering unrest in Baluchistan, which also creates sort of a de facto two and a half front for Pakistan. So
Pretty much,
they
yeah.
also, I mean, were under pressure. I think they just wanted, I think it's just like a Chinese thing. Like they think that the present scenario is not working out. Let's have a tactical pause. And I'm pretty sure they will come up with some other nefarious way to needle India in the near future. I
Yep.
mean, to tell you the truth, both of these neighbors of India, I don't see them the peace lasting very long. They will find some new mind-boggling way, I guess, to needle us in some way, shape, or form. I mean, also you brought up a good point with the Biden administration. I think the I mean, this is just speculation that some are speculating that because the Biden administration came in, there could be a change in policy and they might be more lax towards uh, supporting India, or they might be more, I wouldn't say like pro Pakistan or pro China, but they might be not as opposing of the two countries as a
Hmm.
Trump did. So they might get some more leeway to deal with India. But I think they both found out that there is doesn't seem to be any major change in the strategy
Hmm.
for now. I mean, it could change very well in the future. They just said like, okay, let's take a tactical pause with India, and I mean, you rightly said, I don't think there's any correlation between them. I believe it was either General Lieutenant General Y.K. Joshi or the Chief of Army Staff Navarane, like who mentioned, I think either one of them mentioned that even when the LAC standoff was ongoing, there was no new significant change in deployment
Hmm.
on the LOC. So there wasn't a two pronged attack per se. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I think even in the 65 war and the 71 war, like China has never came to Pakistan's rescue.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
mean, yeah, Pakistan could very well jump in at any time just to take advantage of an unsettled border with China. So
To
I don't
please
see
their
any.
masters. Yeah.
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 So yeah, Kishore.
Yeah, I think that's all we had to talk about the LOC de-escalation for now. You wanted to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's a good development that, I mean, there was some amount of tension definitely on both the fronts.
Hmm.
So a de-escalation is a good news. But I mean, the proof will be only probably if we can gather a year from now and say, oh, there is relative peace
Right,
on both the
right.
borders. I mean, the a keen Pakistan watcher and strategic affairs uh, expert Sushant Sarin said like, oh, the peace with China is probably not going to last to the summer. So it's going to be an interesting summer on both the fronts to see what China does and what Pakistan does. It's a good uh, event for sure. I mean, it's like what's the word I use? I mean, I would say I would use the words cautious optimism on both fronts,
Hmm.
but we have to be very watchful to see what happens in the near future, as things could take a turn for the worse at any time, given the past history we had with China and Pakistan. So
Yep, yep. Okay. So before we wind this episode up, let's switch our focus to recommendations. Mohal, you have anything worthwhile that you want to share with our listeners?
yeah, so I saw like a couple of excellent interviews by Lieutenant General Y.K. Joshi, the
Mm-hmm.
Northern Army commander.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, very well answered all the questions from various media channels or groups. I think there was one with India Today, there was one with Strat News Global, and also like a third channel I can't recall right now. But I mean, he very well answered all the pertaining questions. Now obviously because of the standoff going, he couldn't answer it at the moment, but I think it silenced a lot of the critics, and I think we had a hell lot of critics on the Indian response. I mean, obviously there would be some lacunae in the response of the Indian. They will work on it, but I think some of it was just bias against the political dispensation to just uh, rub them in the wrong light,
Hmm,
or like,
hmm, hmm,
rub them
hmm.
in the wrong way. So I think I've hoped that the interview would have come out earlier, but I guess because of the situation, it would be imprudent for him to give an interview. But I think the critics have gone away for now. Obviously, if the situation deteriorates, or if maybe there is a not a full disengagement, the critics will come back. But I think it has silenced all the critics because it's given very well, and I think it's like a must watch interview for all the geopolitical junkies.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So Kishore, like, what's your recommendation for this week?
Yeah, I would talk about the LOC issue and again point out to one interesting YouTube show that I saw. It's the Rajya Sabha TV channel's discussion about on their big picture program,
Mm-hmm.
wherein
Mm-hmm.
they spoke about the developments along the LOC and attended by a former ambassador and a former veteran, and also Sushant Sarin, who you pointed out earlier. And there they discuss the uh, how to read or how to look at the development of de-escalation along the line of control. So I think that would be my recommendation. But then also, I would also want to point out to how the Pakistani National Security Advisor, or not the NSA, but the advisor to
Advisor.
Prime
Yeah.
Minister Imran Khan,
Mm-hmm.
Moeed Yusuf,
Mm-hmm.
who kind of denied that he had not spoken anything with an Indian NSA, Ajit Doval, just to muddle up the muddle up and bring in
But I
more
mean,
chaos and confusion. He
he
came up with a
can.
Twitter thread telling that the
Mm-hmm.
Indian media was going gung ho that
Mm-hmm.
Moeed Yusuf had actually spoken with Ajit Doval and he wanted to deny that. So that's another Twitter
I mean,
thread that I want to
the
recommend.
report in Hindustan Times said they had a sort of a meeting in a third country also. I
Hmm,
mean,
hmm.
which might have happened, might not happen, but it is. I mean, it might not have been at the NSA level, but unless the political dispensation on the top, on in India and GHQ in Pakistan would have greenlighted this, I mean, this would have never seen
This
the
would
light
have
of the
never
day.
happened.
I wouldn't see like chief of, two DGMOs
DGMOs.
resolving this. It would be like very unlikely.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, this is a decision that cannot be taken just by the DGMOs themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a valid point. Okay, so that was my recommendation for this week. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode, where we looked at how India has suddenly managed to buy peace along both its northern and western frontiers for now. To continue hearing about such interesting topics, do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. If you are listening to us on YouTube, please press the bell icon to get notifications about new episodes. If you have not left us a review, we urge you to do so as it helps other listeners like you in finding us. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions or topics that you would like us to cover. Do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. Until the next time, this is Mohal and Kishor signing off.